All right, awesome. Today we're going to be taking a look at the missing link to lasting weight loss, your mindset. Okay. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Matthew Jacob Jordan. I'm a certified men's coach and mindset mentor. And I've been certified since 2014 when I owned and operated Fit Training and Wellness. And Fit Training and Wellness, it was a really special and a unique place. And we had a really cool concept that was kind of all inclusive. And so we had personal training, registered massage therapists, we had nutritionists, yoga practitioners, all under one house. And we regularly invited guest speakers to come and present on all sorts of different topics about, personal development, self-improvement, and so on and so forth. And when I owned and operated this facility, sometimes people would come to me and they would say things like, I got this problem, Matt. I need to lose like 30 pounds or I need to lose like 50 pounds. And I learned really early on that the weight wasn't necessarily the problem. More often than not, the weight was a symptom of an underlying mental or an emotional matter. And when we began to address some of the mental and the emotional aspects of it, oftentimes the default was that the weight just melted off. And while most personal trainers are focusing on the big muscle groups like their pecs or your quads or your glutes and things like that, I learned pretty quickly that the biggest muscle that we needed to be training was the one between your ears. And it was with that inspiration that prompted me to go and get my certification back in 2014. And back then, I just looked at this mindset training as another tool in my toolkit that would help me support my clients on their weight loss journey. And since then, I had helped clients lose 80, 90, 100. I even had one client who lost 120 pounds. And, I can't even tell you, I've lost count of the number of people who lost, 30, 40 or 50 pounds. That was pretty common. Okay. And so I owned and operated Fit for just about 10 years. And so I'm going to share with you today some of the biggest tools and some of the biggest tips and strategies that help me support my clients on their weight loss journey. Cool. So I remember attending a seminar a number of years ago, and I was in a room of about, a few thousand people. And the presenter asked a question, and they said, how many people here would like to lose weight or get in better shape? And I was stunned to look around the room and see about like 90% of the people had their hand up. And as a trainer at the time, I was like, ooh, how do I get myself a piece of that pie? But it's probably not surprising, to be honest, that most people would probably like to feel a little bit better with their clothes off, like to lose a little bit of weight or, get in a bit better shape. Okay. But that, we're going to take that a step further because wanting is not enough. You have to have a specific goal around that. And one of the things that I've learned through my mindset coaching is that most people don't have goals. Okay. Most people have wants. And what do they want? Well, they typically want the same things that you and I want. You want to lose a little bit of weight or get in better shape. Okay. Oftentimes I hear I want to be happier, right? Maybe have some more free time, things like that. Maybe earn a little bit more money. Okay. But those aren't goals. Those are just wants. And everybody wants those things, right? So a goal is something completely different. A goal is something that's specific. It's tangible. Like it's a target that you can aim at and potentially hit, or at the very least begin to make progress towards. And like my friend Jack Canfield says, that vague goals produce vague results. Okay. And my mentor, he says all the time that, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it with amazing accuracy every time. And I think that that's really true. And so what I'd like us to do right now is to pull out a pen and paper and write down a specific goal for yourself that you'd like to see as it relates to either your health, your fitness, your weight, or so on and so forth. Okay. But the reason I ask you to do that is because studies show that just simply the act of writing down your goals with pen and paper increases your likelihood of success by 42%. Okay. And I oftentimes say, I don't know who makes these pens. Like this one says Sharpie on it, but I think whoever makes these things puts a little bit of magic in it. And the reason I say that is because what you write down has a tendency to become your reality. And simply writing down your goal with pen and paper significantly increases the likelihood of you achieving it. Okay. So what I'd like you to do here is to take a moment and write down a goal for yourself. But before we do that, I don't want you to write down like lose 20 pounds or lose 10 pounds or whatever that might be, because what happens typically when you lose something? You go looking for it. Am I right? And oftentimes you go looking for it until you find it. Okay. Well, we don't want to lose this weight only to find it a little bit further down the road. Okay. We want to release this weight for good, don't we? So what I would encourage you to do here is to write down a specific goal for yourself and like your ideal body weight. Okay. Or if it's not a body weight, maybe it's your waist circumference. Okay. Where you love to see yourself with a waist circumference of, or maybe it's like a pant size. Okay. To see yourself fitting into a new pant size. Or if it's not necessarily like weight related and it's more like health or fitness minded, maybe it's something like, like a number, a blood pressure. Okay, your ideal like blood pressure if you're trying to improve that. Or maybe it's like a resting heart rate. Okay, and using that as like a metric or a number that's tangible. Okay, something that we can measure. Or maybe it's you've got a goal for yourself to do something like compete in a 5K or to run a half marathon or a triathlon. Okay. But let's take a minute right here. What I'd like you to do is pause the video and see if you can write down a specific goal for yourself. Okay. So we'll do that right now. All right. Welcome back. So hopefully you were able to identify a specific goal for yourself, a number or a metric, so that you know at a glance whether or not you're moving closer towards it or further from it. Okay. And anytime I think about goals like this, I always think of this through the lens of universal law. All right. Most people are familiar with man-made law. Man-made law, of course, are things like, speeding limits, right? Breaking and entering, right? Different things like that, violent crimes and such. But the thing with man-made laws is, while man-made laws tend to change based on time and place, right? Laws from 100 years ago are going to be quite a bit different than the laws that we experience today, and maybe change from region to region, right? And the other thing about man-made laws is that you can get away with breaking man-made laws just so long as nobody catches you. So long as nobody finds out, you'll probably be good. All right. Universal laws, on the other hand, they never change. They're universal for a reason, because they are applicable across time and space, regardless. Okay. And the other thing with universal laws is you can't ever break them and get away with it. And I always say that, like, you can fool a lot of people, but you can't fool the universe. Okay. And there's a number of different laws, universal laws I'm talking about here. There's the law of circulation. There's the law of rhythm. There's the law of compensation. There's the law of attraction, which a lot of times people are familiar with, thanks to movies in part like The Secret. What most people don't understand or realize is that the law of attraction is actually a secondary law. It's actually based on a primary law, which is the law of vibration. Okay. But we also have the law of cause and effect, which Emerson coined universal law number 1, the law of cause and effect. And we also have what's called the law of polarity. Okay. What's the law of polarity? Well, the law of polarity states that for every up, there's a down. For every inside, there's an outside. Okay. To have some appreciation of the light, you must have some understanding of the dark. And for you to know the cold, you must have some reference to the heat, right? And for every object or for everything, there's a tangible aspect to it and an intangible aspect to it, okay? Or put another way, there's a physical component and the non-physical components. Okay. So anytime I'm looking at goals, I always see it through the lens of universal law, particularly the law of polarity. All right. And so today we're going to take a look at some of the tangible aspects of fat loss, and starting with exercise and nutrition. And these are the things that we can see, that we can hear, that we can taste, that we can touch, and that we can measure. All right. They're tangible. And first and foremost, we'll talk about exercise. And one of the things that I saw oftentimes when people would set a goal for themselves to start to lose weight is that they typically ended up starting by doing endless hours of cardio. Okay. And let me be really clear about something. I don't have anything against cardio necessarily. In fact, I always say that the best exercise is the exercise that you enjoy, at least to a certain extent, okay? And that something is always better than nothing, okay? So I'm not knocking cardio here. But that being said, it might not be necessarily the optimal form of exercise when it comes to weight loss. And I'll explain why. Cardio, typically people start jogging or start running or start walking and things like that. And just based on the repetitive nature of cardio and the fact that it's typically like a high impact activity, what happens is, like, I think the stat is that with every step you take while you're running, your body absorbs 10 times your body weight. And if you got a couple extra pounds on you, you can imagine that, that's a lot of weight coming down on your feet that gets translated through your body and absorbed through your body. And over time, with thousands and thousands of steps and thousands of reps, you can begin to develop overuse injuries or repetitive strain injuries in your feet, in your knees, possibly even in your back. Okay. The other thing with cardio is that oftentimes, the better you get, the further and the longer you have to go to get the same benefit. So, if you're starting out running 2 or 3 kilometers, and after a while, you'll be running 5K and 10K in order to try to get that same effect. Whereas with weights, you can just pop on another 2.5 pounds on either side and make it harder for yourself without taking any more time. Okay. So that's the first thing. All right. The second thing is that, the difference between cardio and weights could be compared a little bit to, say, the tortoise and the hare, the parable of the tortoise and the hare. And the reason I say that is because cardio could be a little bit like the hare, in the sense that while you're running or while you're rowing or on your stationary bike or your bicycle outside, you're actually burning more calories, okay, while you're running or while you're rowing than you are when you're lifting weights. But when you stop or when you sit down and when you take off your shoes, your calorie expenditure pretty much comes to a halt. Okay. Whereas when you're lifting weights and you're engaging in strength training, once you put that weight down and you go back home or whatever, your body actually begins a process of rebuilding that muscle tissue. Okay. And that process itself requires a ton of energy. All right. But also, if you got that pen and paper handy, I'd encourage you to write this part down. And I want you to write down, build muscle, burn fat. Build muscle, burn fat. And one of the best ways that you can start to burn fat, even while you sleep, is by lifting weights to build muscle. And what that does is it increases your metabolic rate so that you're burning more calories even when you're at rest. So like I said, I don't have anything against cardio per se. If you like it, if you enjoy it, keep going. All right. But if it were me, and I had the option, I would opt to focus and prioritize weight training or strength training, and I'd sprinkle in some cardio for the longevity aspect, for the heart health, and for some of the endorphins that you get. Like they talk about that runner's high, it feels good. Well, once you're done, I guess, right? So that's the first aspect of the tangible, is that exercise portion, cardio versus weights. The second thing that I observe people doing when they would start to try to lose weight is oftentimes they'd engage in endless sit-ups, crunches, sit-ups, and ab rollouts, trying to build and create this six-pack abs, so to speak. And I want to remind you that you cannot spot clean for fat loss, okay? You cannot spot clean for fat loss. And you're much better off to focus on big compound movements like squats, pull-ups, push-ups, lunges, and deadlifts, things like that use your full body, okay, and engage multiple muscle groups to build muscle, all right? And prioritizing those big muscle and those big compound moves to build muscle over things like calf raises or crunches is going to serve you in the long run, 100%, okay? Now, when it comes to fat loss, any diet that you've ever seen of or heard about, like the Atkins, okay, the carnivore diet, maybe the paleo diet, Weight Watchers even, or even intermittent fasting and things of that nature, okay? What it all comes down to is a calorie deficit. And the reason is because fat loss is all about an energy balance, and it comes down to calories in versus calories out. And all of the, fad diets that you've ever come across, if you've heard that they're successful for any number of reasons, it's always because in essence, what they're doing is they're creating a situation that puts you in a caloric deficit, meaning that you're consuming less calories than you're burning. All right. And the truth is that, when it comes to exercise, when it comes to nutrition and things like that, if you're looking to lose weight, that's the number one thing that has to happen. Is you have to be in a caloric deficit. And it doesn't matter which diet, it doesn't matter how you go about doing that. If you're in a caloric deficit, you will lose weight. You could be eating McDonald's all day, every day, but as long as you're consuming less calories than you're burning, you will lose weight, okay? I'm not, excuse me, I'm not suggesting anybody go and do that, okay? Obviously, the quality of the food and the nutrient density of foods like McDonald's is going to be far less than, whole food sources and things like natural foods and ingredients that come from the earth, come from the ground, come from the water, things like that. Okay. So just to be clear here, when it comes to fat loss, the primary mover is going to be creating a caloric deficit by focusing on this energy balance, calories in versus calories out. And sometimes people would ask me, I oftentimes got this question, what's the best exercise for fat loss? Okay. And I always said that the best exercise for fat loss, get this, is plate pushaways. And it's true. And the reason is because it's extremely difficult to out-train a poor diet. Okay. It's just way too easy to consume calories and way, way too hard to burn them. In fact, back in the day when I owned and operated the gym, we used to do a little exercise. I used to have fun with a bunch of the clients when they'd come in. And one in particular exercise that I did was we'd sit them on the row machine and we'd do an activity called Burn a Big Mac. Okay. Or another one I did was like Burn a Blizzard. And if you think about like the small little cups of Dairy Queen Blizzard, the Dairy Queen ice cream, the small contains about 650 calories or something like that. Okay. And what I do is I'd get them to sit there and to row until they burned off 650 calories. And I thought it was fun. I also thought it was an educational opportunity or a teaching moment. But what most people realize is like, man, you can hammer back like a small DQ Blizzard in minutes without even thinking about it, right? But it took like over an hour. I forget exactly what it was, but I want to say it was close to like an hour and a half, an hour 45 to burn like 600 calories on a row machine. And it's hard work. If you've ever been on a row machine or a Concept 2 or things like that, like it's tough. And so a lot of times people got off that and they're like, oh my God, I'm never doing that again. It was awesome. It was awesome. But when it comes to our nutrition, okay, back to our Blizzard here for a moment. One of the things that's really interesting is that they've done a number of different studies that shows that people are notorious for underreporting the amount of calories they're consuming and over-reporting the amount of energy they're expending. And so, while you're eating it, you don't think it's nearly as many calories as it is. And while you're working, you think you're doing way more work than you really are. All right. The other thing is that, there's an old adage from business, but it applies here too, is they say that you can't manage what you don't measure. And if you're trying to lose fat, but you're not tracking your nutrition, it's like flying in the dark. All right. And one of the simplest and most powerful things that you can do to start to expedite your fat loss is to begin to track your nutrition. All right. In fact, they say that, or studies show that people who track their food end up losing twice as much weight as people who don't, which I think is really interesting. But don't get me wrong here. I'm not suggesting that people need to track their food all day, every day. Okay. But what I would suggest doing is even just doing a snapshot and tracking your food for 2 or 3 days before you even change anything. Okay, just start tracking your food to give you a glimpse of kind of like where you're at and what some of those like, caloric intake habits look like. Okay. And then once you begin to develop an understanding of like food sources, okay, quality of calories and also portion sizes, tracking your food won't be quite as necessary. All right. You'll begin to learn some of that stuff intuitively. But to start, I would highly suggest tracking your nutrition because, like I said, people who track their food lose twice as much weight as people who don't. And that's pretty significant in my opinion. All right. So a few different apps that you can use that are available and on the market are things like MyFitnessPal, Macros First, Chronometer, and Eat This Much. Okay. These are all apps that you can download to your phone. Some of them I think even have free options and they can be super insightful. It's super informative to give you an idea of like where you're at and what needs to change when it comes to your nutrition. And some of the findings that you'll discover can be really eye-opening. So, it's incredibly helpful. All right. If anybody's ever tried to track their nutrition before, typically what they'll do is they generally start by tracking their calories, maybe even fat. Okay. Because we've been trained to see fat as a bad thing. Okay. But if you are going to track your calories, I want to remind you and encourage you that it doesn't need to be anything drastic. In fact, if you're starting to reduce your calories, it should not be drastic. And in fact, I would encourage people to try to reduce their calories by only about 500 calories per day. And the reason is because too oftentimes I've seen people try to drastically reduce their calories and they can do so for a while until they can't. And then the diet or the nutrition plan goes out the window and they kind of revert back to their old patterns and their old habits. they get hungry, they get discouraged, they get frustrated, and the results aren't coming as fast as they'd like, and so they quit. Okay. Instead, what I would suggest is by starting small and by aiming to create a calorie deficit of about 500 calories per day. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but over the course of a week, that adds up to be about 3,500 calories. If you're doing that every day for 7 days, that's 3,500 calories. And 3,500 calories is roughly the equivalent of 1 pound. Okay. And if you're to take on a weight loss program or a journey, a goal or a realistic expectation would be to aim to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Okay, 1 to 2 pounds per week. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you think about it, if you were able to do that consistently over the course of, like 12 or 16 weeks or 24 weeks, like now that's real. 24 pounds, like that's significant. You'll notice 24 pounds, 100%. Okay. So starting small, 500 pound caloric deficit per day, aiming to lose about 1 to 2 pounds on average per week. That's the safe way. That's the smart way. And that's the sustainable way. Okay. But if you're looking for an even easier way of tracking your nutrition, I would encourage you to track your protein. All right. Forget about calories for right now, just tracking your protein. And the reason I say that is because we did a nutrition boot camp back at the gym that I owned a number of years ago, and it was a classroom style setting. There was, I think it was like 8 or 10 weeks or something like that. And we come in and we teach people all about nutrition. And one of the things that we had people do was begin to track their protein. And what we found, like across the board, unanimously, was that pretty much everybody was way below their ideal protein intake target. Okay. Nobody was eating nearly enough protein as they probably should be, especially considering how hard we were training in the gym. All right. And so what we did is we started to set some protein goals for them, or had them set some protein goals for themselves and increase the protein levels. And what they found was that they were actually eating more. Okay. They were feeling fuller longer. So they weren't craving things. They weren't snacking. They didn't have any like sweet tooth and things like that. They weren't craving sweets or treats. And they were losing fat. And they were stunned. They couldn't believe it. Okay. But it's true. And we saw this over and over and over again. And you might ask, well, why protein? And the truth is that protein is the building block of fat loss. Okay. And it's very satiating. Okay. It fills you up fast and it leaves you feeling full for a long time. So you're not craving snacks and you're not craving treats and you're not picking away at stuff throughout the day or binge eating late at night. All right. The other thing that you might ask is like, okay, well, that sounds great, but what kind of protein? All right. And this is where I would emphasize the lean sources. All right. So like here, this picture, we've got things like beef and chicken and fish. We've got nuts and seeds and legumes and lentils. And, we've got vegetables and things like that. Cottage cheese is another great one. Greek yogurt, plain Greek yogurt, check the sugar content. Oftentimes that's a tricky one, but plain Greek yogurt can be really good. Things like canned sardines or tuna or salmon, things of that nature. But focusing on the lean sources of protein, I even like, protein shakes and protein bars and stuff like that, especially in the evening. If I'm looking for a sweet treat or, a little bit of a dessert, rather than reaching for something like ice cream or a candy bar, I'll go for a protein bar or a protein shake, and it satisfies that sweetness, but supports my weight loss goals or my fitness goals. Okay. And I was going to say something else there. So focusing on the lean sources of protein. Okay, first and foremost, as opposed to things like I once had a client who we had a conversation around this, and he went away and came back a few days later telling me that, he had been really consistent with eating fried chicken wings, from the pub, and like pepperoni sticks. And I thought, oh, all right, well, I give you points for, I don't know, effort maybe, but I kind of missed the mark there. All right. And so I tried to clarify a little bit of that because, again, those aren't probably the best sources of protein if you're looking to try to lose fat. Stay away from the, fried chicken finger. It's nice for a treat and stuff like that. I'm not saying it's not, but I think you get what I'm saying. And lastly, how much protein should you be aiming for? Okay. And a good kind of reference point or a good goal would be to aim for 1 gram of protein per desired body weight. Okay. 1 gram per pound of body weight. And so let's imagine for a moment that maybe you have a goal to weigh 200 pounds. Well, your target should be to consume roughly 200 grams of protein per day. 180 to 200 grams of protein per day. And I imagine that if you were able to do that, you're going to find a couple of things. One, you're going to find that that's a lot of food. Okay. That's a lot of protein. And two, you're going to find that you don't have room for all that extra stuff. So you don't even necessarily need to be tracking your calories, but if you're tracking your protein and you're increasing your protein sources, the rest of it will kind of take care of itself. All right. So if you're looking for a real simple way to track your nutrition without tracking calories, I'd start with your protein. Okay. Now, a lot of that stuff you've probably heard before, the importance of exercise, nutrition, weight training and cardio, maybe even tracking your food or, increasing protein. That stuff's not necessarily like groundbreaking. Okay. But I'll tell you, if you begin to apply those things on a consistent basis, you will absolutely begin to expedite your fat loss results. Promise you that. Guaranteed, 100%. Okay. But I'll tell you, the most powerful thing that's going to influence your fat loss is not going to be the things that you can measure. It's going to be the intangible things like your thoughts, your feelings and your emotions, and your beliefs. Okay. Those things are going to be the most powerful factors that are going to have the most biggest positive impact on your weight loss and your fat loss. All right. Now, I have the opportunity to ask and talk to a whole bunch of different people with a whole bunch of different backgrounds and different experiences and things like that. And one of the questions that I'll ask people is, you're aware that you have a mind, correct? People always kind of look at me funny. Yeah, of course. All right. Okay. All right. All right. And then I'll follow that up with, well, how much do you know about your mind? Right. Right. And I just think that that's fascinating because it's at that point where people realize, like, actually, maybe I don't know as much about my mind as I think, or maybe as much as I should. In fact, I don't know if I know much about it at all. And I think that that's absolutely fascinating. And the reason I say that is because here we're in possession of one of the most advanced pieces of biological technology known to mankind. And almost nobody knows, one, anything about it, or two, how to use it to ensure optimal results. Okay. Here we've got this thing that's responsible for all of our decisions and for helping us create ourselves and our entire life. And most people are walking around with no idea how to use it. And I just think that's fascinating. Okay. And truth be told, I think this is the kind of stuff that should be taught in like elementary school to every human being. It's not, but it should be. Okay. And so we're going to do that today. I'm going to share with you a tool called the Stickman. And the Stickman is a diagram that was originally invented by a man named Dr. Thurman Fleet. And this was back in the 1930s. But Dr. Thurman Fleet created this diagram to illustrate and represent two things. One, the human mind, okay? And two, how thought energy moves through a human being, okay? So this image is going to help us understand the mind, okay? Now, psychology tells us that the human mind consists of two parts. We have our conscious mind and we have our subconscious mind. And chances are, unless you're living under a rock somewhere, you're probably at the very least heard of those terms, okay? But the conscious mind is oftentimes referred to as your thinking mind, your logical mind, or your educated mind, okay? This is the part of your mind that you go to school for and fill with all kinds of facts and figures and data and information. Your subconscious mind, on the other hand, is oftentimes referred to as your feeling mind, or your emotional mind, or depending on who you're hanging out with, sometimes called your universal mind, all right? Now, a basic psychological premise that we need to understand is that your thoughts control your feelings, and that's why when you have a happy thought, you typically have a corresponding happy emotion, okay? And your feelings influence the actions that you're taking, or in some cases not taking. And depending upon the actions that you're taking, it's going to produce a result in your life. Is that fair? Okay. So if you want a different result in your life, it stands to reason that we really only need to do one thing. And that's go back and change your thoughts. And when you change your thoughts, it kind of has this like domino effect where it changes the feelings that you experience, which inspires you to take different actions. And based on those different actions, it produces a different result in your life. You with me so far? Right. It's the law of cause and effect. Okay. The law of cause and effect. But they say that like your thoughts, change your thoughts and you change your life. Well, it's true. Okay. And this is why it's true. Okay. But the challenge here is that the average person has about 60,000 thoughts per day. All right. Which sounds like a lot until you realize that the vast majority of the thoughts that you think today, in fact, about 95% of the thoughts that you had today are also the same thoughts you had yesterday and the day before that and the day before that and the day before that. All right. The other thing is that most of those thoughts, about 80% of them are negative. You know, whether or not you recognize that or willing to admit that to yourself, that's probably true. And lastly, most of our thoughts, about 95% of our thoughts are unconscious, meaning we're not even necessarily aware of what it is that we're thinking. Okay. We're just going about our day doing stuff, right? Now, here's the thing. Most people are surprised to learn that your conscious thinking mind is really only responsible for about 5% of what you do. Okay. In fact, it's your subconscious mind that's responsible for about 95% of what you do, which is unreal if you think about it, but it's true. And oftentimes I'll hear things like, you know, well, knowledge is power, or when I know better, I do better. Okay. But the truth is that knowledge is only potential power. Knowledge is only powerful when it's applied. And there's usually a very big difference between what people know and what people do, isn't there? For sure. You know, in fact, I can imagine that if you walked up and you found a 400-pound person walking down the street and you were to ask them, you know, like, hey, what would a person need to do in order to lose weight? Chances are they'd be able to tell you, you know, because you really only need to do a couple of things. You know, like we said, you got to eat more fruits and vegetables. You got to increase your protein, increase your activity level, get up from your chair, go for a walk around the block, things like that. And if you consistently did that, this person would potentially lose weight. Okay. But that's not necessarily what most people do. And the reason is, like I say, there's usually a very big difference between what people know and what people do. And the reason is because we're not logical creatures, okay? We certainly love to believe that we are, but the truth is that we're emotional creatures, and that most of our behavior is controlled by our emotional mind or our subconscious mind. In fact, one thing that I think is absolutely fascinating is the fact that I'll share this with you, and I bet you if you were to look closely at yourself and others, you probably agree that we don't make decisions logically. Typically, we make decisions based on our emotions and how we're feeling in the moment. And then what we do as human beings is we have a tendency to layer on logic after the fact, and then we rationalize it and justify it to ourselves to help us feel better. But the truth is like I always say that sometimes I can just be pretty good at selling myself on my own brand of BS, and I can get pretty good at letting myself off the hook. And the reason is because we act emotionally and then justify it to ourselves with logic after the fact. Okay? It's interesting, but it's true. Now, the fact is that most of our behavior is controlled by our subconscious mind. Okay? And down here in our subconscious, we have our feelings and our emotions. We have our beliefs, whether they're social or cultural beliefs. All right? We also have a thing called a paradigm. And a paradigm is, you can think of it like a belief system, all right, or a belief system for like how you view the world, all right. And a large part of your belief system is what's called your self-image. And your self-image is exactly what it sounds like. It's, it's your beliefs, your attitudes, and your perceptions about yourself and who you think you are and what you think you're capable of. Also, what you think you deserve, okay? And I'll tell you, you cannot outperform your self-image, okay? You cannot outperform your self-image. In fact, your self-image operates a little bit like a thermostat. And I'll say exactly like a thermostat in the sense that, just like you likely have a thermostat that's set to a specific temperature in your room right now, okay? Your self-image operates exactly the same way. And while your thermostat is set to ensure that while the temperature of the room might fluctuate a little bit up and down, okay, your thermostat ensures that the temperature kind of stays within this range or this like band of comfort, right? AKA your comfort zone. And your self-image operates exactly the same way in the sense that maybe imagine you begin to start to lose a little bit of weight in the short term. Well, what typically happens? Most people who start to lose a little bit of weight, they usually put it all back on again and then some, don't they? And the reason is because one of the strongest forces in human nature is this desire to remain consistent with who we believe ourselves to be, okay? And that's why I say that you cannot outperform your self-image, all right? And unless you change the underlying subconscious beliefs, paradigms, and self-image, your results on the outside are not likely to last long-term, okay? This is what needs to change. If you're really to experience a change in your health, in your fitness, in your weight, even in your finances, your career, or your relationships, okay, if that's a goal of yours, that's maybe a conversation for another workshop. But for the purposes of today, if you're to experience a lasting, sustainable change to your weight or to your health and your fitness, this is what needs to change, okay? For sure. Now, oftentimes when people start talking about exercise and nutrition or fat loss and things like that, we start talking inevitably about habits, and good habits and bad habits. And the purposes of today's conversation, we could talk about exercise habits or eating and nutrition habits, okay? Because we all have them, right? But sometimes I'll ask them, okay, what is a habit? And typically the response that I get is like, well, it's an action or a behavior that I do repeatedly, and sometimes maybe I'm not even necessarily aware that I'm doing it, right? And that's true, okay? That would be an acceptable definition of a habit, okay? So an action or a behavior that's repeated over and over and over again. And sometimes we're not even aware of what we're doing until somebody points it out to us, am I right? But I want to present to you a slightly different definition or a slightly different way of understanding a habit that's going to be really helpful in our workshop or with your fat loss journey. Okay. And that idea is that a habit is the physical expression of a oftentimes unconscious belief or idea. Okay. I'm going to say this again. A habit is oftentimes the physical, or it is the physical expression of what's oftentimes an unconscious belief or idea. Okay. And if you got a pen and paper handy, I want you to write this down. All right. And I want you to write down belief drives behavior. Belief drives behavior. Okay. Now, why is this important? Well, when most people are looking to change their result, whether it's the number on the scale or the waist circumference, okay, or, trying to lose weight, right? What they typically do is they start to try to change their behavior. They start to try to change their actions or their habits, okay? They start to try to exercise more, wake up a little earlier, go to the gym, change up their eating style or their eating nutrition habits, okay? They'll try to change the behavior, but very rarely ever do they think to change the underlying belief behind the behavior, okay? And let me be really clear about something. Any lasting change that you're to experience on the outside, any change or transformation, always comes with a change in your belief, okay? When you change the belief, you change the behavior by default, all right? So don't worry about trying to change the action or the behavior itself. If you focus on changing the belief, you change the behavior by default. Okay. Now, you might ask yourself, you might say, okay, well, like, belief about what? Okay. And that's a fair question, but the truth is that we have beliefs about all kinds of things. Okay. We have beliefs around cars, clothes. We have beliefs around money, all right? We have beliefs around sex. When you better believe we have beliefs around food and exercise, don't we? For sure, okay? And so we also have beliefs about ourselves, too. And remember, our beliefs drive behavior, all right? But oftentimes, the challenge is that we're not even necessarily sure as to what our beliefs are. If you look back here, our beliefs live below this level of conscious awareness. They're deep inside our subconscious. And so we're not even oftentimes completely sure what our beliefs are about certain things. We just believe them. All right. So Dr. Carl Jung, who was a pioneer in psychology, one of the godfathers of psychology, once famously said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll just call it fate. Okay? It will direct your life and you'll just call it fate. And so what I want to encourage you to do here is to start to become more aware, more consciously aware of some of those unconscious beliefs around things like food, exercise, and maybe possibly even yourself. Okay? And one way to do that is to do a little bit of a mind dump, okay, or like a little brainstorming exercise. And what I would encourage you to do here is to take out a blank sheet of paper and at the top of the page, write down something like healthy food. Okay, let's start with healthy food. And for the next 3 to 5 minutes, I want you to pause the video here. And for the next 3 to 5 minutes, I want you to write down anything and everything, positive or negative or neutral, that comes to mind around healthy food. Okay? And I'll meet you back here in a quick second. And go. All right, beautiful. Welcome back. So if you did that exercise, hopefully you have a list of a whole bunch of things that come to mind when you start to think about healthy food. And a little brain dump like this is helpful in allowing some of those unconscious thoughts to bubble to the surface, where we can capture them by writing them down and then take a step back and look at them. And if I'm going to imagine or assume that your list might sound somewhat similar to some of the other things that I've heard from people about healthy food. Some of the things that come to mind are things like expensive, all right, doesn't taste great, I don't crave it, takes too long to cook, okay, it's inconvenient, it spoils fast, okay. There's other things too. Sometimes people write down things like colorful or homemade or mom's cooking or, so on and so forth, all right. But when you begin to look at some of these beliefs and some of these ideas that we have around things like healthy eating, you can start to take a look at the pattern that emerges. And oftentimes it's not a very good one. Oftentimes it's like, well, it's inconvenient to eat healthy. It doesn't taste good. I feel like I'm depriving myself. It costs too much. Okay. My kids don't like it, and so on and so forth. And what's really interesting about that is that those beliefs alone will stop a person from ever pursuing eating healthier food. Now, a belief is just that. It's just a belief. A belief is just a thought that you continue to think. And it doesn't necessarily make it true. Okay. In fact, you could start by asking yourself, okay, well, let's look at one of these. Like, is it time consuming? Well, there are things like, you could ask yourself, is it time consuming? Is that always true? Are there circumstances where that's not true? Do I know of some healthy foods that are quick and easy to make? And when I think about our household routine, our weekly routine, we oftentimes will do like a one pot meal, like a chili or a soup, where we just chop up a bunch of stuff, throw it in one pot, fill it with water, and let it simmer for the day. Probably takes like 25 minutes, but it feeds us for like 3 nights. Or like a one pan, a sheet meal, where we chop up a bunch of meat and veggies, throw it on a cookie sheet, throw it in the oven for 425 degrees for 25 minutes, and it's done. Hands off, So you could start to look at, okay, well, maybe that's not always true. And if it's not always true, or if it's not universally true, well, maybe that belief is more of a disservice to me than anything. And you could do the same about exercise. Start to look at some of those underlying beliefs, okay? And start to ask yourself, well, is that true? Is that always true? How do I know that's true? Do I know of other people where that's not true for them? Perhaps I could learn something. What are they doing, or how do they approach this in order to get that result? Okay. But the point that I'm making here is that if you are to find lasting, sustainable change, okay, really what we need to do is we need to create a change in that belief system. Okay. And when you change the belief, you change the behavior. And when you change the behavior, by default, it produces a different result in your life. All right. So I guess you could ask, well, how the heck do you change the belief? All right. And there are 2 very specific ways that you can change a belief system or change your paradigm. Okay. 2. The first is what's called a strong emotional impact. All right. Now, here's the thing, is it's usually like a crisis of some sort. All right. It's usually like some form of hitting rock bottom. Okay. Or it's like a health scare or a near-death experience. In fact, back in the day when I owned and operated that fitness facility, I had a couple of clients who came to me. One was, she got a diagnosis from the doctor that did not look good. It was prognosis negative, that they thought maybe cancer. They encouraged her to start to improve her health. And man, I've never seen somebody that was so committed. Here was somebody who had previously despised the gym, didn't want anything to do with picking up a weight, and now couldn't keep her away from the gym. So that was some motivation. It was a strong emotional impact, okay? Or it was like a crisis or a scare that was the catalyst to create change, all right? The thing about those strong emotional impacts is, like I've said, that they're usually negative. And two, they're usually outside of your control. All right. So something happens that forces you to make a change. The second way to create a shift in your belief system or to change your paradigm is through what's called repetition of thought. All right. And I always say repetition of thought combined with elite level coaching. And it could be different things like, it could come in the form of visualizations. It's a very, very powerful tool. It could take the form of affirmations, and spaced repetition with affirmations to train our thought patterns. But one of the most powerful tools that you'll ever come across is what's called immersion. And it's immersing yourself in a community of people who are like-minded, who are motivated, who are working towards a similar goal or outcome. Okay. And James Clear talks about this in his book, The Atomic Habits, when he says that, one of the most powerful forces is the power of our peer group. And one of the best things that you can do if you're to try to create or establish a new habit or routine is to join a community where that habit, that desired habit or that new habit is already the expected norm. Okay. And the reason is because we always unconsciously take on the qualities and the characteristics of the people that we spend the most time with, and when you start to get around people, their attitude, their energy, their belief system, their thinking, it starts to rub off on you. And you might even recognize that you maybe start to say the same thing, maybe even use the same hand gestures and so on and so forth. But we all unconsciously take on those qualities and characteristics. In fact, I have a friend of mine, his name is Sergeant Sven. Okay. And Sergeant Sven was a sergeant in the South African military. And he once told me something that I thought was so powerful and so profound. He said that when they got new recruits, okay, and young privates, what would happen is, he says, it's too hard to change the man. So we change the environment, and the environment changes the man. And I just think that's really powerful and profound. So a takeaway from that is to join a club or a community that already, where the desired habit or the desired goal is already the expected norm. And one of the most powerful things about fit training and wellness, in my opinion, was the fact that when people came in, we knew who they were, we recognized them, we were excited to see them, we used their name, we greeted them warmly, and it made them feel like a community and a member. And that was a very, very powerful experience. And so if you have a gym membership or you're training somewhere, I'd encourage you to start to create connections there, create community, have an accountability partner, so on and so forth, because that's a very, very powerful factor that will contribute to your weight loss goals. Okay. So just to recap here. All right. First and foremost, we talked about the importance of setting clear and specific goals and then writing it down with pen and paper. And just that simple fact of doing that alone will significantly increase your chance of success. Okay. The second thing is that, when it comes to exercise, cardio versus weights, like I said, I don't have anything against cardio per se, but if you build muscle, you burn fat. Build muscle, burn fat. Okay. And also the importance of tracking your nutrition. And if you're trying to lose fat, but you're not tracking your nutrition, you're essentially flying blind. All right. And then lastly, the importance of your mindset. And I always say that mindset is everything. And when you begin to change your mindset, everything on the outside begins to change by default. Okay. And the reason is because what we talked about here, that your belief drives behavior. And when you change your beliefs, you change your behavior. All right. So I hope that helped. I highly encourage you, if you have any other questions, to reach out, ask away. Happy to lend an ear or support you in any way that I can. But I promise you, if you guys take what I shared today and you begin to implement it, because remember, knowledge is only powerful when it's applied. But if you begin to actually apply what we talked about today, you'll be well on your way to creating that weight loss success that you've been looking for. All right. So best of luck. Let's keep in touch. We'll talk soon, and take care.